Hello and welcome to Nutrition and Medical Science at UCL. My name is Professor Nathan Davis and I am the course director and head of education in the Division of Medicine. I'm also a registered nutritionist, and the staff that teach on this course will have lots of experience either as registered nutritionists, dietitians, or by research work in this particular area. Why do you study at UCL? Well, UCL, as you clearly see from the UCL website and also general talks that you can look at, we are a top university, regarded in the top 10 in the world, and we are consistently there. Currently, we are number 8 in the QS university rankings, and we generally sort of sit somewhere about that point. We're 6th in the world for ranking our scientific publications and papers. And we've got the best academic student ratio in the UK, so one member of staff to every 10 students, and that's according to the Guardian University League table. We're the best performing university in the first and second years of the EU funding scheme, which is a European-wide scientific research programme organised by the EU. We are still the 4th highest rated university for employability, and also if you look at the surveys that come out, there was one recently published by the BBC, that UCL graduates actually earn a premium compared to other institutions. So, and in this particular degree area, which is health-related sciences, then our students are earning £6,000 to £7,000 compared to the sector average 5 years post graduation. And also, we're the second most cited university in Europe. Considering UCL is a very broad university, we cover pretty much every topic area, then actually we do incredibly well in this regard. We are the top university in the UK for research strength by the last research assessment that was conducted by the government. And we have a long, proud history. UCL was the first university to admit women on an equal basis. We're also the first university to admit students regardless of class or religion. And we have a very distinguished research pedigree. Currently 29 Nobel laureates and counting on either people who attended UCL or have conducted their research at UCL. I mentioned before that we are very strong in biomedical sciences, and we are the highest ranked medical and biomedical science university in the UK. And if you look back over our sort of publication records, you'll notice that actually the rest of the world takes more notice of our publications than they do for other institutions. These surveys come out about every 10 years or so. And if you look here, when papers are published, scientific research is published, and other researchers cite those papers, you'll see that there we are, right at the top of the graph. More of our papers are cited by other institutions than anybody else in the UK. Now, it shows that the depth and strength of our research heritage, which is one of our features that we're very, very proud of. Why are we studying nutrition and medical sciences? Well, this program examines nutrition, all stages of life, problems including obesity, disease-related malnutrition, eating disorders. And the thing is, these come from lots of different causes, and we will go through them with you and we'll talk about them and have an understanding of their causes and also what their impact is, both within the UK, Europe, and the world as a whole. And as we said several times, we are world leaders in research in this area for nutrition, obesity, child health. Great Ormond Street is one of our partner hospitals, so we're particularly sort of strong in this area. We also have leading experts in epidemiology and the psychology of disordered eating. The one thing it's not a food science course. So if you're out there, you're looking for a course, a degree that's going to give you insights into food production, into food science, into production methods, that type of thing, this really isn't the course for you. There are lots of other universities that do that type of thing, but we are doing a biomedical science course with a focus on nutrition, particularly from clinical aspects. So if that's what you want to do, this is the place to look, but we don't do production and food science. Why nutrition? Well, clearly everyone has to eat, so everyone has an opinion, everyone has a vested interest in it. And there's an awful lot of misinformation out there. So one of the things we really look to do is dispel myths and actually to get people to understand the science behind the subject. And what you eat will have a greater impact on your health than anything else you do. It will affect how long you live, how well you live, and your chances of developing other conditions. Your diet affects how you grow and develop, and the likelihood of you developing disease, and also your overall lifespan. And factors such as overnutrition, undernutrition, and malnutrition all are related to premature mortality. And there's lots of history in this. As you can imagine, people have obviously been eating forever, and the thoughts and the trying to understand what happens about your diet go back way into history. And start here with this, like Hippocrates, I'm sure you've heard of. So Hippocrates, very famous for the Hippocratic Oath, which is the one that all qualifying doctors take. He said several other things as well. One of them, particularly pertinent: let food be thy medicine, and medicine be thy food. And I think we're coming to understand now that what we put into our diet and what we put into ourselves is absolutely crucial for our health. And he also came out as well with this, which is turned out to be remarkably perceptive. And that he said all disease starts in the gut. And what we're starting to understand now is that the bacteria in our gut that we live with in a sort of symbiotic relationship have a massive impact on our general health and well-being. And by understanding how we can look after the bacteria in our gut and what the makeup of that bacteria does and how it affects the rest of us, I mean, that's a science that's really developing now and blossoming in recent years. And we have several people, researchers at UCL, who are really looking into this and at the forefront of understanding that science. We look at starvation. So starvation obviously is a problem, and we can look at this. I mean, you may remember this as a publicity stunt that was done by the magician David Blaine several years ago now. But the effects of starvation are very real, and they're very important. And when people are coming out of starvation and you're trying to get them to recover, there are real problems. You have to understand the metabolism absolutely to understand what's going on. And if people are fed too quickly, they undergo something called a refeeding syndrome, which is incredibly dangerous and actually can be lethal. We look at starvation from a number of different aspects. We look at starvation that occurs because of things like anorexia. And people that we have working at UCL have written the frameworks around how you manage anorexia in the population and in clinical settings. And we have real in-depth expertise in this particular area. Other things you might not think about, so you consider people in hospital, particularly the elderly, they can be starving even though they are being fed, and that's quite a strange situation. And there's a condition that develops, which is called sarcopenia, which is where the muscles start to get broken down inside the body because the nutrition is quite right and you're not actually sort of working the body. And this is, again, becoming a very important topic in medicine, especially as we start to look at things like recuperation from serious illness. Obviously, when we're talking about nutrition and we're talking about the clinical scenario, we have to consider obesity. But we consider obesity at a number of different levels. There is the pathways to obesity. We look at tackling obesity. We look at bariatric surgery for the extremely obese subjects, and the implications of this, and also what's necessary to consider as part of that care. We have lots of history. UCL is an institution that's full of a very proud and distinguished history. And one of the people that came before us back in the sort of 1930s, 40s was Professor Jack Drummond. So Professor Jack Drummond was important in his own right because he was the discoverer of how to make vitamin A. But potentially more important for the health of the nation was Professor Jack Drummond and his team were the people that devised the ration system for the UK during the Second World War. Now, as you may be aware, during the war, there was limited resources, and so people had to be put on rations for the type of things you see here in this slide. And if you look at this, you might consider actually that it's not very good. I mean, look at the amount of fat, margarine, sugar. If you actually look at the bacon and the meat there, I mean, there's quite a lot of fat in it, and people wouldn't generally choose to eat that type of thing today. However, the diet was very carefully worked out, and people did not suffer nutritional deficiencies during the Second World War. You also have to consider that this amount of food was spread out over quite a long period. I mean, this was something like well over a week's limit for a person. And when you take that amount of food and you spread it out and then you supplement it with unlimited amounts of fruits and vegetables, actually it turned out to be incredibly healthy. And as you can see in the slide, it is regarded that people were healthier during the Second World War than we've been at any point in our history. And if you could bring back rationing, then it's quite likely that actually you cure a lot of the nutrition-related illnesses that we see today. It wouldn't be very popular, but it would be very effective. We also have to consider the modern cost of malnutrition and what we mean by malnutrition. And malnutrition is not just simply you don't get enough to eat, because there are plenty of people who have lots to eat but are still malnourished. So malnourished is wrong nutrition. And what we look at in the course particularly is what's important to have in the diet, and actually where people have consumption of too many sort of empty calories and the consequences of that. And some of the consequences you can see is that we know that the world is gaining weight at an alarming rate, and you can see here. I mean, this is something from the Office of National Statistics, and a few years old, but you can see that these are adults aged 16 or over who have a body mass index of 25 or over. So these are either overweight or obese, and it's quite surprising to think that 2/3 of the country is showing obesity in adults. London's a bit lower than the rest of the country, but that's because London tends to be a bit of a special case and tends to have an awful lot of sort of transient population of younger people, students, things like that particularly. But if you look at the sort of permanent residents, London sort of matches up with the rest of the country. And it's really quite concerning because all the add-on and the costs associated with the poor health that results from extended periods of obesity. And the problem is it's getting worse. I mean, you can see here that these are men and women, and the prevalence of obesity that were going through the years from the 90s up until the early 2011, 2012s. And this is obesity, so the BMI greater than 30, not just 25, but that's still approaching a quarter of the population, women more than men. And what is even more concerning is when you look at the BMI of where it's 40 or more. So now we're looking at the sort of quite severely obese. And you can see that these are also tracking up quite considerably, quite a substantial rate over the same period. And it's not slowed down since. We tend to look at America as well, because what happens in Europe tries to track what happens in America, at least in terms of diet and obesity, with a few years behind. It used to be that we were 8 to 10 years behind what was happening in the US, but actually we're catching up, which is, again, a source of concern. I'll keep this slide to talk about because this was a sort of interesting one. So here you're looking at body mass index of 30 or more. So this is obesity, not just overweight. And in 2014, they actually had to invent a new colour when they went to over 35% of the population being obese. And as you saw in the previous slides, the UK is catching up, but not quite. We're not quite at the same state as the US at the moment. Although, with our current trajectories, we won't be too far behind. We also consider diabetes, and we know that there's a link between obesity and diabetes, but it is not an absolute, and it all gets a bit confusing. We have people who are seemingly of normal body shape and body size, but who develop diabetes, type 2 diabetes that is, but we also have people who are obese and don't develop diabetes. And there are reasons for this, and we really get into this when we look at the course, and we look at metabolism and see what's going on. We look at genetic predispositions and things as well. So there's an awful lot there to sort of consider, and it isn't really as simple as quite often it's made out to be. But it is getting worse again. As we see the tracking up of obesity levels, then there is an association with diabetes as well. And again, this is some figures from NHS England. We go to 2015, and then when they projected for 2025 and 2030, and you can see there's an expectation that this trend keeps on going up. And the problem for the country, and it's not just in the UK but all around the world where we see these same patterns repeating over and over again, is that the costs associated with this to the health services are absolutely astronomical. And if you look at what these costs are, well, back in 2007 it was predicted that it was estimated it cost the NHS around 4.2 billion. But the expectation is we follow these sort of trends, it's going to over double that by the time we get to 2050. The wider costs of society, these are loss of productivity, people taking days off, people taking days off to care for others. They're estimated to reach something like £50 billion by 2050. And there was also some other analysis recently. There's a study called the Million Women Study, and that found that currently women aged between 50 and 84, around 1 in 8 hospital admissions were attributable to being overweight or obesity itself. So if you can imagine that you could cut out, 10 to 15% of hospital admissions for women over 50, again, that would ease the strain on the health service considerably. We also have to think about food security. And food security is a definition set by the World Health Organization, and that says that when all people at all times have access to sufficient, safe, nutritious food to maintain a healthy and active life. And there was an awful lot of strain on food security. I mean, there are, as well as supply issues, there are people in the world who just can't get the food physically because it's just not there for them to get. But also, there are economic strains as well. We have plenty of people in the UK, which is an affluent country, who just cannot afford access to safe, nutritious food. And one of the things that we also consider is the rise in food bank provision. And again, you will have noticed in the news over recent months that the strain on food banks has become a lot greater due to sort of current circumstances. But this is something that's been with us for a number of years. Well, ordinarily, we like to get out and take you into hospital to see what clinical nutrition looks like. These are a group of students, I think about 2 years ago, and they were visiting one of our partner hospitals and tasting all the food to see what it involved. Actually, what they're tasting here are fortified foods that people are given usually post-surgery when it takes a little bit of time to get back to normal eating habits, and these are extra things put into them, extra calories, extra vitamins, mixes, that type of thing. We also do a series of laboratory practicals. We look at practicals around body composition. We look at practicals that relate to energy expenditure and how you can calculate this so we know what energy going in is like, what energy going out is like. We do a lot of work with dietary composition and food diaries in order to understand what we're putting into our bodies and how we use it. There are a lot of practicals actually we do, and a lot of our practicals also revolve around the basic skills associated with a biomedical scientist. So particularly in year one, there is a sort of very broad laboratory practical structure that teaches you sort of the core skills of a biomedical scientist. Here we've got some other students looking at body composition, and this is where they're doing bioimpedance analysis and comparing this with other methods of looking at how the body is made up. What are the benefits of the degree? Well, you get a thorough grounding in nutrition science, the way it relates to personal diet, lifestyle, and the modern powers of disease. That's also in the context of a biomedical degree, so you get a really good, thorough grounding in biomedical science, and then how you can apply those principles and techniques within nutrition. We give you a holistic approach, a real whole world approach to obesity and malnutrition in the modern world, looking at biomedical and societal approaches. The knowledge and skills you gain in this program will enable you to engage with, discuss with, converse with healthcare professionals, nutritional scientists, and whichever sphere you choose to work in after graduation. It may be that you consider working in a biomedical area or a nutrition area. However, you also have a really solid degree that will let you take those skills and apply them across any sphere that you want to out there in the world. And why would you do it at UCL? Well, because we are leaders in this area. We're a world leader in biomedical research. We've got a large variety of expert teaching and a wide range of outstanding research opportunities. This is what you need to know. The UCAS code is B400. It's a 3, and their entry requirements are 2 A's and a B, including biology, and 1 from chemistry, physics, or maths. For other backgrounds, International Baccalaureate, BTEC, or HE diplomas, you can see those on there, and more details are on the website and also in our prospectus. Just a little note, UCL also has requirements that you need GCSEs in English and Maths at grade B or grade 6, and there's also a requirement for UK students to have a modern foreign language. One thing we should also point out is that this is taught as part of a suite of degrees within the Faculty of Medical Sciences. So what we do is we teach a core first year. There's a lot of modules in common across all these degrees. You see down the bottom, what we're doing here is we're teaching people that those really core biomedical areas, you get a really good understanding of biochemistry, metabolism, and physiology around the major body systems. You then do 1 module in year 1 that's particularly specialised to the degree choice. So following nutrition and medical sciences, you do nutrition and metabolism part 1. And then when you go into year 2 and year 3, the degrees diverge and you do specialist modules related to your sort of core degree. Now, the reason we've structured it this way is, 1, we think it's important that everyone has a really good understanding of the body and the way it works. But the other thing is that it also allows you a lot more flexibility. So because Coming in year one, everybody has the same core modules to begin with, and then this specialist module is only taken towards the end of the year. If during the course of that first year you feel that you'd rather change and do one of our other degree programs, then switching is very straightforward. So we will allow students to switch. I mean, we have a few caveats around that and just make sure that people are performing properly, but it is perfectly possible for students who come in, for example, following a biomedicine degree course, who decide they want to do nutrition, switch into it, and vice versa, and so on. So in this way, we've created a lot of opportunity for students coming in wanting to do something in the biomedical area, perhaps not entirely certain which particular one they want to follow, and they can still make their mind up during that first year. Following nutrition and medical sciences degree, we have year 2 modules, which are predominantly focused around nutrition science, but then we also have a range of optional modules you can choose as well, which are quite diverse. So if there's anything you particularly want to look at that really appeals to you and something you want to follow up, then we have quite a range of optional modules that are available to you. And the same in year 3. We have the compulsory modules, and then we have optional modules as well. There are potentially other additional optional modules you can look at, but these are the main ones we've listed here. The other thing to point out is that in year 3 you will do a research project, and you'll do a research project with one of the researchers, either in one of our hospitals or in UCL itself. And this is an opportunity to do something really original and really get involved with researchers and to understand the thinking and the process behind it. So, last thing to say is just to talk about how we teach at UCL. So we have been teaching using innovative teaching methods now for a number of years. We have developed and expanded upon the idea of doing flipped classroom work, where we have a lot of pre-recorded videos to take you through some of the fundamentals that you need to know, and then those are expanded upon in workshops and small group teaching sessions. We do some stuff with peer instruction, some teamwork, some quizzes, because that's very popular. We do a lot of stuff with case studies and problem solving. The assessment, particularly through the first year, is very heavily focused around the coursework, and that's something that we've been working on and developing over about the last 6-7 years. And we also want our students to develop a portfolio of the degree. So a portfolio really is becoming the modern CV. So by showing your skills and putting in particular pieces of work that highlight the things that you've done and that you're really proud of, this gives you something that's a really interactive way to show a potential employer or future university the type of skills and the type of person you are. Obviously, we have research projects we mentioned there, but we also work with other things as well. We're introducing a lot more high-tech simulation stuff, which matches with our practicals and gives us the possibility to expand on the principles we talk about. And ordinarily, we'd also like to have field trips as well as lectures. Now, currently, the current circumstances make this a little more challenging, but we are still working to ensure that all of these elements of the course will be put in place and that we will still have a really rich and rewarding experience. So I'll finish this talk now. We all have the opportunity to have questions, and I look forward to chatting with you on the message board. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.